between you and me, right where you are right in this moment, is exactly where you were meant to be. So, wherever that may be, just be.
To be a new you.
Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Joygasmic Life podcast.
Your permission slip to raise your standards and live an even more amazing life. Now, if you're feeling like that's way out of the ball game and you're really suffering with like pain in your body, guilt, shame, anxiety, depression, like these emotions run a lot of people's lives, and that's not by accident. Our culture is set up to keep us in those emotions because it's easier to control people when they're in those emotions. But if you're on an awakening journey and you have recognized that those are there, you have taken the most crucial step to get out of that, which is to become aware that it's actually happening. It's time to awaken, to bring all the parts of yourself back to this present moment and explore the joy that is your life when you live full out, fully expressed, fully harnessing the joygasmic potential of your body and yourself. Anything is possible, and especially we are here to tell you that deep and fulfilling love is possible and is available for you when you choose that for yourself.
Welcome to the Joygasmic Life podcast. Today's guest is Tilly Storm. You want to listen to this episode if lack of confidence, low libido, or guilt and shame around your sexuality are the cause of your bedroom woes. If any of those things are stopping you from the wild, hot sex that you never have anymore, or the transition into motherhood has sucked your libido dry, which is unfortunately common, you need Tilly. She's a holistic sex coach for women that lack desire and want to feel sexy again. As a certified sex coach, Tantra, and Jade Egg teacher, Tilly uses deep transformational tools and techniques based in modern coaching modalities and ancient tantric wisdom and Taoist practices to help women get their desire back and have the most mind-blowing sex of their lives. And we all want that somewhere in ourselves, even if it's hidden behind trauma and whatnot. You can check her out at tillystorm.com, and I'm absolutely looking forward to having her on the show. She'll be with us shortly. Well, awesome, Tilly. Thank you so much for joining me on the Joygasmic Life podcast today. I'm really excited to connect with you and to chat. And for those people who are new to your work or have never met you before, how did you get into this work of helping women with their sex lives?
Okay, well, that's a great place to start, I guess. Well, I am a sex coach, holistic sex and intimacy coach for women that lack desire, want to feel sexy again. I also work with couples and I teach them tantric sex and, well, really the art of better sacred sex. And I got into this after working at a birth center. I had my first baby unassisted, on the living room floor of my house, like when I was 23 years old, and I had my second one a couple of years later, also completely naturally, but he was premature, so I ended up having him in a hospital. And both of the experiences were just super amazing. And I ended up working at a birth center as a birth doula and a midwife apprentice for 7 years.
Wow.
And I noticed that women really struggled with their sexuality after kids, which is so interesting because it's not something that I struggled with personally.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. But what I did struggle with was the guilt and shame around my body and my sexuality. And I just remember being about 27 years old. I'm 36 now. And I was working at the birth center at the time. And I remember thinking, is this all there is to sex? Like there's got to be more.
I've had that thought absolutely in my life. I'm like, there's got to be more than just this physical thing that we're doing. Feels pretty good, but there's got to be something. There's got to be something more, and turns out there is.
Oh my God. Right. Well, I mean, I wasn't even thinking about more tantric aspect of it so much. It was just that I was only able to orgasm in one way. And I just felt really inhibited in my body. Like I felt weird and awkward and shy and embarrassed around doing certain sexual things, even though they felt good, but it was just like a shutdown. And I wasn't sure at the time where that came from or why I was having that experience. So I started doing some research, and I ended up taking a jade egg class.
The jade egg is such an entry point for so many people in this beautiful practice. So tell me more.
Well, the jade egg practice is the Taoist practice, and it's basically like yoga for your vagina. And I heard that it could help you work through guilt and shame around your sexuality, and it could help you to be more orgasmic, multi-orgasmic, that it could help you unlock, like certain sexual potentials that maybe you've never really knew about or didn't even know existed. So I was like, okay, sign me up. I'm totally in. And I did the practice about 3 days a week. So let me just make this clear. The jade egg practice is not wearing the egg around and sleeping with it at night. It is very much an active thing, right? Almost everybody I know.
I'm doing my jade egg practice sitting inside my vagina while I'm sleeping. That's called practice. It's like, in what world is that called practice?
Right. Yeah. And some people would even argue that that's not even hygienic or safe. Like, would you leave a sex toy up in there for hours at a time? Probably not. So, I'm trust your body kind of person, listen to your body, but yeah, it's a much more active practice. It's actually squeezing and releasing different pelvic floor muscles, working with the 16 different muscle groups in your vaginal canal to help.
We're gonna have to dive into that.
Okay. To help.
I'll make a note and we'll come back to that. But 16 different I'm just like, say what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So
it's a work.
Okay. So yes, there's 16 different muscle groups in your vagina. You have your pelvic floor, which is actually like a hammock that is crisscrossed. So you have one striation that goes from the coccyx to the pubic bone, and the other that goes from the left and right to the sides of your sits bones. So it's sitting like a hammock like this. And that's what actually holds up all of your internal organs. So that is the pelvic floor. Your vagina is not the pelvic floor. That is. So it's just the part right at the perineum. It's just one tiny muscle, or it's not tiny, it's actually very large. It's a muscle group that just holds everything up. So when you say squeeze your pelvic floor, most people will squeeze everything down there, and they don't have dexterity. They don't have the ability to even differentiate what they're squeezing most of the time. So if you've ever been to pelvic floor physical therapy, one of the goals is to help you learn how to feel what are you squeezing, right? So the jade egg is really helpful for this, because not only does it give you a point of reference to start figuring out what are you actually squeezing there, because you have an anterior side of the vagina, a posterior side, you have the left side, you have the right side, you have a muscle group all the way up towards the cervix, you have the perineum itself. There's just it's so complex. And when you work with the jade egg, you develop greater dexterity to be able to squeeze and release different muscle groups in the vagina. Not only is this helpful because it's strengthening and toning your vagina, but because it allows you to feel more pleasure as you're squeezing and releasing, because the strength and tone of your vagina is directly correlated to your orgasm. So how long and strong it is. So most women are walking around with atrophied vaginas. Although you don't want to think of it that way, if you have problems with urinary incontinence, if you have prolapse issues, then this is all a sign that you have lots and lots and lots of work to do. It's not normal to have these issues, but we've made it normal in society by saying funny little things like, oh, after you have a kid and you sneeze, that's totally normal. You know, you can't go on the trampoline. And, so.
And a lot of women struggle with that. Absolutely. And for decades after having their kids. And it sounds like, with the jade egg practice, there's absolutely tools that we can use to fix that up faster than 10 years and not doing anything.
Right. And, you can, Kegel muscle exercises are what doctors always tend to recommend. But, well, first of all, they were developed by a man. So, not too sure how effective that's going to be for strengthening and toning your vaginal wall and your pelvic floor. But it also doesn't, that's basically like telling someone to squeeze your pelvis is like saying that in order to increase tone and strength of my arm, I'm going to squeeze my entire arm. But if I want better biceps, how is squeezing my entire arm and all of the muscles in my arm going to help my biceps? It doesn't. So it can only get you so far, with Kegel exercises. But if you really want to work on the tone and strength of your vagina, using a jade egg is a great reference point, because you feel it, you squeeze it, you release it, you squeeze it, you release it at different depths of the vagina. And you also do different breathwork practices and meditations around it as well. So it's a bit woo for some people, but almost everyone that I've worked with that has tried it and that was like scared that, oh, it's not going to work for me. I'm not a spiritual person. Like, this isn't going to work. It always does. It works. It's magic, whether you actually believe in it or not. So anyway, well, I guess
that's like saying, well, I don't believe in like jade egg practice improving my vagina. It's like saying, like, I don't believe like lifting weights is going to make my biceps bigger. And it's like, let me think about that for a second. It's like, well, if you do it regularly, with some training and some support to know what you're doing, I mean, hauling a weight around all day is maybe not going to improve your muscles, but if you have guidance and you know what to do with that weight, absolutely your biceps are going to get bigger. Yeah. I'm curious if this has something to do with like period flow as well, because I've noticed as I've started free bleeding more and more over the last years that the blood will sort of stay until I squat to release it, and then it'll come out. And I was like, who do I ask this question to? I don't know. But I was wondering if that actually has something to do with the strength of the pelvic floor and sort of those vaginal muscles to hold all that in.
Yeah, I would
definitely
say so. Yeah. That, I've noticed that too. I don't necessarily do that. I usually use a moon cup, but yeah, I mean, in the first day when it's not much for me, I've noticed that I can hold it in, basically squeeze it out too. So I think there's definitely something to that around the tone and the strength of your vagina. But at the same time, just because you can't do that, don't feel bad, because some women's vaginas, no matter how much toning and strengthening you do to them, it's just that the shape, like, they can't hold a jade egg inside. So, so you work with doing different squatting positions when you're using the jade egg too. And some women can't even do the squatting positions because it'll just like pop right out, right? But that doesn't say anything about the tone and strength. Sometimes it's seriously just structural. So yeah, I guess.
And we all have different beautiful vaginas, beautiful yonis, so they're all different in their own unique ways.
Yes, totally. Well, so to go back to the story about how I got in it. So I learned the practice. I was doing practices like 3 times a week for 10 to 15 minutes a day. And after 2 months of doing the jade egg practice, I recognized that one day in the middle of like a wake and dream state, I felt all of the shame that I was carrying just leave my body in a cloud of smoke. It was pretty surreal. And I just felt like 1,000 pounds lighter after that. And it was that same week that I became multi-orgasmic. I started different types of orgasms. So there's 8 different types that we can actually define. There's really infinite orgasms, as you No, Joygasmic. You can have
Absolutely.
emotion gasms, anything.
Eargasm, toegasm, elbowgasm, neckgasm, all the things. Yeah.
Exactly. So I started having different types and in different ways. And uh, then I started to get more into Tantra. And that's
Mm.
when I started a coach training in sex, love, and relationship coaching to professionally do this. And, having come out of the birth world for a while, it was, that was kind of my inspiration. It's like, wow, this is cool. If it could help me clear my guilt and shame around my sexuality and help women really get back into their sexuality after having kids, like I just knew that's what I was here to do with my life. So sign me
Mm.
up.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I know that feeling too, for sure. Yeah, and it's really interesting coming from that like birth world and then moving into sort of the intimacy world because you were seeing that other women around you were having challenge. And then also clearing sort of your own guilt and shame in that process. It's super beautiful.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, so if women come to work with you, what are they most scared of? What are they most like? What are the reasons that they come and they go, okay, it's time to work on my sexuality. It's time to work with this, because a lot of women just go, oh, it's not a big deal, whatever, sex life, and they sort of like brush it off, and they don't make a priority of it. So what are the women who are coming to you for support, like why are they making it a priority?
Yeah. So most of the women that end up working with me are working with me because they have several of the following goals. So one would be that they lack desire for their partner or desire in general, the passion and spark for life sexually in their lives. They've lost their creative juice. They don't know what the fuck happened to it. It's just gone. Right. And
Yeah.
a lot of them also come to me because they do not know what they want sexually. They've never
Mm.
explored it in a way that felt good, or they have so many hangups around self-pleasure, guilt and shame, religious guilt and shame like I did, or they people please and overgive. They think sex is about their partner, and they got that message that we all get, really, that sex is for men. And often that just builds up resentment so much that feeds into the lack of desire, because if you really knew that sex and pleasure were for you, you wouldn't feel resentful about it. So
Yeah, and you would approach intimacy really differently, right? Instead of this like, oh, like how can I used to walk around with this like, how can I get ready? How can I get my vagina ready so that I can have sex and it won't be totally unpleasant so that he can have an orgasm? And you're just like, hold up, honey, like you missed something in there, like you totally missed something. And the thing that's missing is this like, oh, like I want to feel good in my body. I want to share that with another being that I love and adore. How do I go about doing that?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a lot of where women are hung up, is that they don't know how to get that back. They don't know how to like get rid of that conditioning around their sexuality being for someone else. Also, a lot of them come because they do have sexual trauma and they have worked with a therapist or something on it before, but they've never really, it's never cleared from their body. So everything I
Mm.
teach is very body based and somatic based. And unless you have an excellent somatic therapist, you're not going to go deep enough in therapy to release yourself of sexual trauma. So I tend to work with a lot of women that have been to therapy before to work on their sexual trauma, but it's just not, they're not over it. Like
Mm.
I mean, they're over it in their heads, but their body isn't on board yet. They're just like,
Absolutely.
yeah, they're not having the orgasms. They still feel stuck sexually. They feel like something is missing. They feel like they can't fully express themselves, and they kind of judge their desires. And they, if they tend to the kinky things, there's tends to be a lot of judgment around that maybe was hardwired from a sexual traumatic experience, and a lot of shame around fantasy, all of that stuff. So we tend to work a lot with clearing that from your body when women work with me. So whether it's the jade egg practice or doing different guided self pleasure practices and meditations. Yeah.
Beautiful,
Mhm.
beautiful. Yeah, I can just see there's, that idea that the physical, the mental version of the trauma has been talked out, rehashed, reframed, whatever that might be, but the body has a physical memory. We talk about the cervix and the hip muscles storing that tension physically. And so then, of course, like, oh, you just worked your brain through it. That's like saying, as long as I check both ways before I cross the street, I'm not going to get hit by a car. But if you've been hit by a car before, your body is going to triple, quadruple check before you move forward. And if you don't create a new container that says I'm safe, I think the metaphor sort of flew away there on me. But if you don't create a new container for your body that says I'm safe, then it can be really challenging, especially if that, sexual trauma is with an existing partner. Like that's a really big hurdle to go over. But I think a lot of women, the trauma happened in childhood, early teen years, past partners, so it's really, I remember this one woman I worked with, like her current partner was a sweetheart. He was like totally respectful, like, oh, she got triggered, hands off, pull back, give her space, whatever that is. And like she would just keep having this trauma back from this moment when she's like 5 or 6, and it would just like put her body into fight or flight instantly the second she got into anything that even closely resembled intimacy, because they were so tied up in her mind and in her body. And it's really beautiful to see that unravel over time through the work that happens, and create new possibilities from there.
Yeah.
So in your understanding, like what actually causes that lack of desire in women? What is the root cause of that you see most often?
All right. There's a few things, but let's back up to explain what is the difference between libido, desire, and arousal, because
oh yes, please,
this is important. Okay.
Yes.
So libido is your physical hormones, your body's ability to make the necessary sex hormones in order to actually want sex. Okay. And what super aggravates me about this whole, it's my hormones, it must be my hormones, is that women always think that if they don't want sex, then it must be their hormones, because Western medical system has done a really great job of making us think that there's always something wrong with our bodies. So
absolutely not true.
Yeah. Right. Not true. 99% of the time, this has nothing to do about why you don't want sex. Okay. So it's not about libido most of the time. Now, if you have hormonal issues, if you absolutely work them out, get them fixed, whatever. But that's probably not going to fix much. Okay. Because there's desire and then there's arousal. So desire is the emotional and intimate connection needed in order, the environmental stimulus needed to turn you on, right? And arousal is the direct path that can happen. And that is different for different people. Okay. So desire, so if this is the emotional connection, and this is like the feeling of joy and pleasure, and like, I have access to that. Like if you don't have access to that, then you're not going to feel desire, right? So what shuts down desire is negative conditioning, trauma, which the negative conditioning can consist of guilt and shame around sex from maybe religion or your parents, your family of origin, all of that. And then obviously sexual trauma. And there's not a single woman on this planet that doesn't have one of these too. So we have to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to
So
work
bad.
with the negative conditioning and the trauma to release the unconscious patterns that we have hardwired in our brains, that instead of being a turn on, instead of something that should be a turn on, but maybe you don't feel turned on by it, right? That when you unwire, and well, I should say rewire these unconscious patterns, it gives you more access to pleasure. So I always explain it on a 3-part brain system. Okay. you have your cortical thinking mind, your limbic system, and your unconscious or primal brain. All sexuality and relationship, vulnerability, intimacy issues are patterned in your unconscious primal brain. This is why you can go to therapy for years and years and years and talk all you want about it, but it ain't gonna change anything. Because until you go deep enough to the somatic sensations in your body, holding on to whatever you picked up from the past to keep you loved, to keep you safe, to keep you belonging, until we go to that level, they're never going to really release desire, lust, passion, ecstasy. You don't have access to these states until you work through the blocks and through them. And the blocks are lying in your body, in your unconscious primal brain, and they present as sensations in your body. So when we're working with your sexuality and getting your desire back, it's about going into those unconscious blocks and really feeling, wow, what's actually here right now? What do I feel in my body? Like, a lot of women never think about what they're actually feeling in their body, sensation wise, right now. So
it's just an endless to-do list, right? Da, 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 behind on this, need to do that, blah, 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 blah. It's like,
yeah,
where
exactly.
does the body fit in that? Nowhere. The body doesn't have anything. Check in on what my body's feeling isn't even on the to-do list, you know?
Right.
For most women.
Usually not, for sure. So yes, lack of desire is caused from negative conditioning and trauma, to make it succinct and sweet. To answer your question.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I love how you broke that down. It's like libido, the hormones, desire, like the environment, and then arousal is like the actual actioning in that environment, you know.
Oh, and we could go on about arousal too if you wanted.
Let's hear a little bit more about that, for sure. It sounds like there's something juicy down that rabbit hole we're gonna explore.
There's all sorts of juiciness that way. So arousal is hardwired in our childhood growing up, and there's a couple of ways that so arousal means the things that actually turn you on. Okay, I like to break it down into two categories. Okay, there's one, you have your people, because this can be women or men. You have people who are turned on by energy, by sexual energy, by deep intimacy, by connection. Yeah, she's like, yep, that's me. People that are turned on by receiving a massage, by having like a transition throughout the day to get them out of like work mode into sensual mode. So maybe it's a hot bath, maybe it's something really simple like, I don't know, meditating for 10 minutes in between putting kids to bed and, you know, coming into your own world or something. But there's always like some sort of transition, right, that you really need, or a date night. Okay. Maybe it's a date night that you just need that time to like take yourself out of your everyday reality and put yourself in a different environment. And that excites you, that turns you on. Okay. So you have people like that. And then you have other people that are turned on by explicit sexual acts, by their genitals being touched, by looking at visual stimulation, seeing a naked body or porn, and by kinky things. So, and kinky meaning anything that's taboo for you and it really turns you on. So kinky things being like sensationally kinky or psychologically kinky. So it can be like intense sensation. Maybe you really like intense sensation. Maybe you really like soft, feathery touches. And maybe you like the BDSM stuff and that really turns you on too. So arousal, people are usually turned on by, you know, that's a very broad category. Like that's the sensual and the energy stuff, or the very explicit sexual and the kinky stuff. And arousal is that most of us end up with a partner that's probably opposite.
How does that help? Well, because it keeps us safe from having to explore that, and that's appealing to like deep parts of the psyche. Would be my quick answer.
Exactly. Yep. Because when you end up with a partner that is opposite of you, then that gives you an opportunity to grow and expand your sexuality. Which, when people have been together 20, 30 years and they're like, our sex life is fine, but we've figured out what works for us. And, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. But if it's kind of like getting boring or like unenticing for you, maybe you are with a person that is aroused by the same things that you kind of are. And the growth potential there is to take you out of what's common for you and to start trying new things that aren't so common to you, because you can train your body and yourself to be aroused in different ways that aren't natural to you. And I will tell you that it's work. It is work, but it does grow and evolve you in your sexuality as human. And that is a beautiful gift and a beautiful thing to experience. So if you're one of those people out there that are like, oh, that's me, but my partner's totally opposite, well, just know that this is an opportunity for you. It doesn't mean you're not meant to be together. It doesn't mean that you're bad for each other. It doesn't mean something is wrong with your relationship. It just means you need to better understand each other's sexuality and how you're aroused so you can start to actually feed each other's needs for once. So that's what I wanted to say about arousal.
And I'm curious because you said that those patterns are sort of formed in childhood. So, childhood trauma, we think about things that keep us out of control, or like things that feel out of control or helpless, and that causes a trauma. How does our formation of arousal in childhood work from your perspective?
Well, I think there's many different factors that form our arousal patterns, but I think that the biggest predominant one are, neurons that fire together wire together. So when you had your first orgasmic experience, when you started touching yourself for the first time, the ways that you did those things then, the things that you were thinking about then, that will generally dictate what's happening, right? So, if you grew up with porn, right? And all you ever saw was visual stimuli, and that's what turned you on, and you orgasm to that all the time. Well, then chances are you're going to grow up and you're going to be someone that's really turned on by explicit sexual things. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how you are wired. And if you're with someone that was totally exploring herself or like just touching herself one day, no visual stimulus, but maybe you just, as a kid, you tap into that spiritual connection, like that intimate, like I'm just right, that present moment awareness, right? When you're a kid, you have so much more access to that. And if you're in that moment, you're in your beautiful bedroom and it's a beautiful day outside and you start touching yourself and maybe you're 10 and you're like, oh, wow, that felt good, and you had your first orgasmic experience and that's what it was like. Well, chances are you're going to be more really sensitive to energy and really interested in the spirituality around your sexuality and being really present with someone, because neurons that fire together wire together. So that's what I would say the biggest, way that we are blueprinted is happening in childhood. So anywhere from 0 to 17-ish, and once you're past that initial developmental stage around your sexuality, it starts to just become more apparent and it starts to become like hardwired. And that's why I'm talking about like evolving your sexuality is so important, because if it gets hardwired and that's the only thing that turns you on, it can be a problem later on if you end up with someone that's different.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you either have the choice of sort of staying in some sort of stuck pattern with that, or again, evolving into exploring different things, learning how, because that fire and wire, like we can shift it, we can modify it, but it definitely takes work. It absolutely takes work to do that. And kind of got to decide whether the relationship you're in is worth doing that work, whether you want to, whether you'd rather stay stuck, whether and that's why I asked about the reasons that women want to do this, because it's like you really have to be clear. I think you really have to be clear on the reason. What are you hoping to get out of this deep dive work, this like relatively challenging, really deep limbic system, really, emotionally fraught, sometimes really traumatic work? If you're like, oh, so that I'm more peaceful, it's like that might not be juicy enough But if it's like, I want to have multiple orgasms, I want to be super hot, I want to make sure that my partner's not cheating because they're really sexually satisfied, I want to be really sexually satisfied, I don't want to be cheating, or whatever that might, whatever form that might be, like those are like big hairy goals to get to, rather than or not so hairy as your case may be, um, but those are goals to move towards, I know in my own journey, it was really get out of a traumatic relationship and to heal from that. But I didn't really start making big progress on that goal of healing that. I got a little bit better with each progressive relationship, but it didn't get really better until I tapped into that big, not so hairy goal um, of being, really orgasmic in my body and myself. And I already understood energy orgasms pretty well with myself, but the journey with a partner was something like radically different for me to explore. So I just think it's important for women to hear that no matter where your journey is at, like, you can change it, but it will take work and you need to know why you're doing it. Absolutely.
Uh-huh. Yeah, for sure. In my Tantra for Lovers program, we generally work with people that are opposites, right? So usually the woman is the one that's interested in the sensuality and the energy, and the man is more interested in the explicit sexuality or more of the kinky things. Sometimes it's the opposite. I'm in a relationship where we're the opposite. I like the explicit sexuality and he likes the energy and the sensual things. So it can go either way.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we generally work with them in that way because Tantra, because there are just no tools or techniques out there to teach someone how to feed the need of someone who is fed by emotional intimacy, connection, and energy, and lots of anticipation around sex. There's there's not much there to help people understand how to meet the needs of someone who is aroused and wired that way sexually. And Tantra for Lovers, that's what we're doing. We're helping, usually the man connect with his sexual energy so he can learn how to feed her needs more deeply. But I always have to make that total disclaimer, he's learning to feed your needs, but you also have to learn how to feed his, so it goes both ways. It's just that there's more resources and tools, and everyone, you can learn how to masturbate, you can learn how to, do a little striptease for your partner, whatever. These things are more well known and people can find them on the internet fairly easily. So
yeah,
it goes both ways.
Yeah. I think that brings me to one of the questions I wanted to touch on with you, which is, do you need to feel turned on sexually in order to start intimacy? What are your thoughts around that?
Oh, not at all. So the biggest sex organ is your brain. Okay. So the more that you think about sex, the more that it's going to be easy to be turned on. So you do not have to be, obviously, you never want to say yes when you really mean no. And if your vagina really doesn't want to be penetrated, okay, so sex obviously can mean lots of things. But if we're talking about penetrative sex, whatever, then we're talking about, obviously don't ever be a yes when you really mean no. But what needs to happen is if you find that you're someone who lacks desire or you just don't think about sex a lot, one of the best things you can do is to start putting in cues in your environment of sexual things. Start thinking about it more. Schedule it. I know that
Absolutely
sounds sucky and shitty, and you're probably thinking, my God, if I ever got in a relationship where I had to start scheduling sex, then it's probably not worth being in it. Who the fuck cares?
I mean, as a parent who's managing children all day, absolutely. If you want to have an active sex life, you need to schedule. You need to have a time of day that you meet up, whether that's in the morning, mid-afternoon while the kids are at school or whatever, or in the afternoon, or all three, depending on where you're at. Absolutely scheduling it. It doesn't seem sexy, but I don't know. It works for me. I've heard other parents talk about it. It's like, if we didn't have that, it might not happen.
Right.
And
Totally.
there's something huge to be said about a 30-day sex challenge as well, like every
Yeah.
day for 30 days and see what happens. Like that's a big deal. That's how my partner and I started our relationship. I was like, look, I don't want to get into a habit. He moved in with me. We'd known each other for like 4 months or something like that. He moved in with me and I was like, look, I already have a platonic roommate. I don't need another platonic roommate. I don't ever want to get stuck like my, my perception of my parents' sex life where it's like just not happening. No offense to my parents. If you're listening to this, I love you very much. But um, but like I didn't ever want to end up in that. And I'm like, let's just have sex for the first 30 days. And I didn't really want to have sex some of the days, but I was willing to show up, see what would happen, see what we could explore and what might happen. It's a really powerful practice. I totally advocate people doing. It's tricky though.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it can be really great for some people who really struggle to think about sex and
Yeah.
who struggle with arousal. A lot of times it's because, you know, meeting the needs isn't well known by your partner and they don't fully understand you. And well, that's mainly because you don't fully understand yourself yet. So how could you tell them what you want when you don't even know, right? But
Yeah.
also when you schedule it, you can work with your brain, right? And this is why it can be great for some people because you're working with your brain throughout the day. You're like, right, I'm supposed to have sex with my partner then. All right, let's get turned on. Like, what can we do to feel luscious and juicy? And see how it's happening like days before it even happens. That can really, that's what feeds the needs of some people is that they need that anticipation. They need that wait and that longing and knowing that it might happen to really get them going, right? Because you might not be turned on by your partner coming up to you, kissing you, and then touching your vulva. I mean, I do, but not everybody does, right? So that might not do
Right.
it for you. So
Yeah, I mean, depends on the kiss, right? Like,
right.
but I remember having a partner who he touched my bum in a way that just made me want to punch him in the face. And he's like, "Oh, my ex really liked it." I'm like, "Well, I'm not your fucking ex. Like, get off my butt, like stop touching me like that." It's like, oh, some people are in marriages and that's their response. So obviously there's some like work that could be done there to not be wanting to punch your partner in the face. No longer my situation, thank God.
I
It's
think
like that's where some people are at.
Yeah, for sure.
And so the anticipation, like, oh, like I know in 2 days we'll be having this experience and getting to look forward to it, or even this evening or tomorrow morning or whatever that might be. It's like, oh, like something to look forward to. And that in itself like helps with that wiring of like, I'm gonna have sex. Your brain is like anticipating, like we're gonna have sex, it's gonna be yummy. I'm gonna communicate what I need in order for it to be yummy, those kind of things. Yeah.
And for some people, like that's just what it takes to have a healthy sex life with their partner, is really just making it happen and making a commitment to making it happen because you do want to have an active sex life and you do want to remain connected to your partner in that way and not feel just like roommates anymore. So it can be really good to try it out.
Yeah. Well, talk to me a little bit about the journey of like building sexual confidence, I think for some women, especially who are listening to this or who might come to work with you or me, the idea of scheduling a sex date in the future is like, but what happens when we get there? Like, how do I communicate my needs? And like, what is that journey in terms of coming to better understand your needs and then being able to actually communicate them?
Well,
you're like, why you ask such big questions, Elena?
I mean, this is why the majority of women end up doing my group program is because they don't know what they want. They don't know what they like. They don't understand their bodies. They don't understand their own sexuality. So the way that we do that and the journey there is, well, there's several things. So there's mainly four. One is you're working with your nervous system to release your biggest blocks around what's keeping you from pleasure. Is it fear? Is it disgust? Is it shame? Is it guilt? I don't know, probably a mixture of all of those and something else. So, we have to work with your nervous system on that deeper level. And that looks like completing stress cycles, getting really freaking weird. Okay, that means doing cathartic processes like hand screaming, pillow punching, going fucking wild, throwing a tantrum. Like just release, release, release. Because all of this built up negative conditioning and trauma that you have grown up with has not been given the opportunity to be released from your system. Okay,
Absolutely.
children are amazing at releasing things from their system. I mean, they throw tantrums all the time, and if you think of a 3-year-old that threw a tantrum, what do they do when they're done? They are done. Like
Yeah.
when it's done, it's done, and then it's like it never happened. Okay. We could do that, except we don't allow ourselves to do that. So when you had a negative experience around your sexuality, you probably didn't go shake in the woods, and you probably didn't yell and scream when you probably really wanted to, because maybe you weren't having a traumatic experience happening to you, and it wasn't safe to do that at that time. So what ends up happening is your body shuts down, desire, lust, passion, all of that. And it says, oh, this isn't safe. So we have to work with your nervous system on this deep, deep level to release these stress cycles and give them the opportunity to come up and out and release them. So we think that we all have to learn and do all of these things when actually you've always been multi-orgasmic. You've always had access to pleasure. You always had these things. You were not broken. The libido fairy did not pass you up. Like you have desire. It's just that it's uncovered under all of these layers of things that you've not been allowed to release. So we work with your nervous system. We work with the jade egg. Okay. And the jade egg practices are amazing because they are helping you to drop the goal of orgasm. And if you want to learn what works for you, you have to go in without a goal. You have to have beginner's mindset. You have to go back to when you were 13, 14, 15, 16, and you first started exploring your body. You have to go back to that, wow, what is it like to touch my body? And like have no goal. You didn't have a goal when you were like, I don't know, maybe you were smaller too. Like some people started exploring and having orgasms when they were 6, 7 years old, sometimes even sooner.
I've heard 3, 4 from a couple people. Like,
yeah,
you're just like, not my experience, but wow, okay.
Right. Yep. So you just want to go back to that beginner's mindset of like, what was it like to explore my body in a way where there was no expectation on my body? Because a lot of times the things that shut us down are the feeling like we have to perform and that we're expected to have some end result, aka orgasm, right? The number one killer of an orgasm is feeling like you have to have one. So
oh my God, I can't count the number of times in my life, like probably in the hundreds, if not thousands, where I'm like, I'm so close to coming, and the words coming out of my mouth, like just like whoop, you're like back at zero. It's like, seriously, what the heck? And it's like, oh well.
Yep.
So you said like the number one killer of an orgasm is like, I'm about to have an orgasm. Just even like re-engaging the verbal mind to be able to say that. It's like, what a libido killer, not a libido killer, an arousal killer. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you've got to have access to that deep embodied pleasure. And you always do. It's just covered by all of these things. So when you're doing jade egg practices and guided self-pleasure practices, you're dropping goals and you're exploring. Because, and I have clients all the time and be like, I went to the OMGYes website and I watched how all of these other women do it. And I read all of the techniques online and I told my husband how exactly it works for, how Cosmo tells me how to do it. How that programming has always worked for everyone else, but it just wasn't working. And I'm like, well, yeah, because you're following someone else's blueprint and none of us are wired and blueprinted the same way. So you can read all of that shit you ever want to read. You can read all the Cosmo articles you can until you're blue in the face, but what has worked for someone else is very likely not going to be the same formula for you. And I've heard that word. I've had a client that has been like, the formula we've had for the last 15 years is no longer working. And I'm like, okay, well, where did that formula come from? And it's basically
Mm.
just what you see in movies, you know, and all of this. And now that she's in her mid-30s, it's like, oh, right, okay, but that's not me, and that's not really satisfying me anymore. So
Right.
you have to come back to finding what does turn you on. Well, the only way to ever figure it out is to stop trying to make yourself go somewhere or to force your body to do something, and just exploring. So that's the second part of the journey. And then the third part is going into deep integration. So, around any sexual trauma that you might have, what I like to call lasering in on something that's like a one time thing. Like your jade egg practices, when you're working with your nervous system daily, like that's all helping to tend to the soil, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you imagine this is like a garden metaphor, like those things, the everyday things you're doing, the jade egg, the nervous system work, you're making the soil rich and ready for something to grow and bloom. The Like when I do one-on-one coaching with people, we're going deep into the body sensations, to the somatic layers. We're also working with inner child stuff, inner masculine and feminine stuff, which you got taught from your mom and your dad or a mother father figure, around sexuality and pleasure, and all of that stuff. But it's like once it's done, it's freaking done, and then you can move on, right?
Yeah, and usually to another level that's like way juicier and more fun,
Oh,
right? It's like,
absolutely.
oh, I don't have that like imprinting from my mom or my dad anymore, and now life is more beautiful.
Mhm.
My intimacy is more open and free.
Yeah. So that, I mean, the good thing about that stuff is it is like a one-time deal. I mean, sometimes the inner child work, however, can take several, a month or two if it's really deep, to rewire patterns of the inner child, to reparent your inner child, all that stuff around a healthy narrative around pleasure and sexuality. So we work with all of that, and that's like pulling weeds out of your garden, right? It's like, okay, throw this one out, we're done with that shit. No, no, we want to plant something awesome and glorious here, and we need to get rid of
Mhm.
these weeds. And then, community, sisterhood, support, like being in a group of other women who are also going through this, because most of the reasons that we're shut down sexually aren't always a personal thing. They are, it's a collective trauma of oppression
Yeah.
of women's sexuality, and you can only heal collective trauma in the collective. So I've even found that working with my clients one-on-one is not sometimes as effective as women that go into my group programs, simply
Mm.
because you need other women. You need to heal that with other people in a group where you feel like you're being seen, and it's safe to be seen, where you can actually celebrate your breakthrough around your orgasm, where you can celebrate having your first cervical orgasm. Because my God, how many places can you go celebrate? Oh my God, I just had my first cervical orgasm, right? Not many.
Your group, my group. That's about it. There's
Okay.
maybe like 400 other women on the world who are like doing the kind of work we're doing, something like that. But definitely not the
Right.
supermarket. Definitely not your like PTA meeting or whatever. You know.
Exactly. So
Not recommended to celebrate your cervical orgasms at the PTA meeting. I just imagined that.
I
You
mean,
can
I
celebrate them
probably
silent.
would.
You can celebrate them like silently on the inside. I mean, we homeschool, so we got like a pretty alternative, like woo woo group of like parents that we hang out with. But
Yeah, we just started homeschooling too, so maybe it'll be okay eventually. The parents PTA without like advisory boards and crazy like teachers unions and all this crazy shit going on in the world right now. So
hmm hmm
yeah.
yeah. Oh gosh. So I'm kind of curious, we've talked sort of in generalities thus far. I mean, like lots of specifics around themes and topics, but I'm kind of curious, like in terms of like if you're open to taking it like one level deeper, maybe a little bit more personal, sharing about some of the stories you hear from women in your group or from yourself or from myself about what is actually possible when it comes to healthy intimacy, about fulfilling intimacy. Because I think a lot of the time women just don't really know what that looks like. It looks like, I don't know, Tom Cruise and that chick from Top Gun or something. It's like the first thing that's like, oh, that's healthy intimacy. Like, that's not healthy intimacy. That's like pretty messed up intimacy, actually. But so what are some of the things that are possible, or what are some of the things that you've experienced after doing this work?
Yeah, I mean, almost a third to a half of my clients who do this work end up getting job promotions, raises, or they just make more money in their own business. This is because alignment. Like, if I could sum it up in one word, it's alignment. So when you're integrating your sexual hangups and you are connecting with your sexual wholeness, you're going to orient and align to more of the truth of who you really are. And when you do that, you become more magnetic and powerful. You start to gain back power. And power, one form of it is money. So a lot of people, when they start working on their sexuality, will start, because of this like feeling of empowerment inside, they'll automatically just become more magnetic and attractive to people, and they'll start attracting things to them even though they were never really looking for that, or maybe not even asking for it. So that's one thing that I see very often. Obviously, having different types of orgasms, multiple orgasms is a huge benefit because you don't feel so stuck in one way, right? You don't feel like, oh, it only happens this way. Obviously, more intimacy and connection with your partner, because you're getting so vulnerable with yourself by going this deep with yourself that you can only hold space for another person as much as you're able to do that for yourself. So when you're going to this depth within you to get to know the parts and pieces of you that you may wish would just go away, that you wish would just not be there, and you're finding secret enjoyment in those pieces being there, and really like integrating all of that shadow work, right? That's all shadow work. So when you're integrating all of that, it just aligns you, and it opens up this sense of vulnerability, like, oh, I can share more of who I am because I actually know who I am. And that just naturally flows into your relationship. So your relationship becomes deeper and more intimate. You have more access to share what you really feel with someone because you've discovered those emotions. You've gotten in touch with certain emotions, and you've learned how to work with them in a way that's actually healthy instead of trying to shove them down and not feel them like most people do. So sometimes just sharing intimately with your partner the emotions and what you really think, the emotions that you really feel and what you really think, it becomes easier because you've already done it for yourself. So of course it would be easier with your partner when you've worked on yourself already. So yeah, I would say that would be the biggest changes.
Yeah, I mean, and all of those are profound in terms of how they ripple out and affect all the areas of your life, being more authentic, more centered, not having those wounds. Not having those wounds means you're not passing those wounds on to your kids. Means when they go like, "Hey mom, what about sexuality?" You can go, "It's a beautiful, wonderful, fun, delicious thing that, I hope you get to explore in wonderful ways, and I'm really open to you talking to me about it."
Yeah, absolutely.
Rather than ask your dad, and dad goes, here's some porn. And you're like, well, that didn't go the way I wanted it to. Like, you're like, wow. Right? It's like, those are radically different conversations. Those are really, really radically different conversations.
Yeah.
And, part of my mission is helping to create enlightened families. And I really keep coming back to saying like that comes so much to partnership also, but like often it's the conscious woman who's leading that charge, who's sort of raising the bar and saying, this is how we're going to operate it as a family. This is what, looking at our shadows and talking about our challenges together looks like. And when we heal those things, then we don't have those challenges. We're not passing them on, through patterning to our children. I think that's absolutely really, really huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically, if you dread having that conversation with your kids, then you need to work on yourself and stop dreading it, because that's just your own unconscious guilt and shame showing up. I always have people ask me that, like when I first started my own podcast, like a lot of the topics were like, how do you talk to your kids about sex? And I'm like, well, if you don't feel like you can freely do that, then clearly you got your own hangups, lady.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, obviously clearing your own stuff is a part of it. Um, my son is 10, and I don't think a single day goes by without him like pulling a banana out like a penis. I think it's like a pretty much everyday thing. And I just go like, well, that's interesting. Aren't you a vibrant sexual human being, who thinks it's really funny? And it's interesting because when I think about it, it's like part of me still goes like, I don't know if that's okay. And then the rest of me is like, well, I think it's okay in the family environment as long as he's not humping any of us or anything like that. So we talk about that, and I go like, please don't ever do that, at your homeschooling program or with strangers or, but we're able to talk about that. But I can just see that so many people, so many women, men would just like clamp down as soon as that experience happens. And there's probably steps. It's hard for me to see the steps because I've been working on this journey since he was born. It's hard to see what the steps might be to create that clear container with yourself, other than the things that you've obviously outlined.
Yeah. Start with you.
Start with me. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, why does that make me feel uncomfortable? I'm gonna have to do some diving into that one because I do still have this like, why is he doing this? There's something for me to work on in there. Another layer of the onion.
Yeah, usually is.
Yeah.
Cool.
Beautiful. I'm just thinking like, it seems like there's like infinitely more we could talk about, but I'm not quite sure what in this particular moment.
Sure. Well, take your time.
I was just really grateful to be here.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm just thinking. So, building a business around being an intimacy or a sexuality coach is probably one of the more taboo things that you can do in the world. What has your journey with that been like in terms of coming into your own capacity to offer and to share, in terms of actually building out and creating a business around that?
Yeah. Well, my business journey has been intense, to say the least. Yeah, mine was kind of a do or die situation.
Okay.
I actually started my business right when I was getting divorced, and I had
Okay.
nothing but a shit pile of debt, and no backup plan. And I hadn't worked like a real job in probably 7 years or so.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'd worked at the birth center and just like self-employment type stuff, but I never like worked for another person.
Mhm.
So it was very scary. It was 2018, is that right? Yeah, early 2018, and I had to sell my house, and otherwise it was gonna get foreclosed on, so we had to sell like immediately. Luckily it sold right away, and I made like $2,000 off of my cut of it, right? And that's all I had. So
Yeah.
I had $2,000 to my name, nothing in my bank account. I had just graduated from the sex, love, and relationship coaching training that I've done. It was a year-long program, and I still had a year to go, but like the main certification I was done with. And then I had like specialty areas in tantric sex, the JDEG, and men's sexuality that I did later on. But that year, it was actually ended up selling my house, closing on it on my 33rd birthday. Is that right? 34th? Yeah, I'm about to be 37. So yeah, 34th birthday. It was the saddest birthday ever. It was awful.
Yeah. Oh my God, divorce, house foreclosing. Like,
Yeah. Oh, it was awful. My entire life was shattered. Like literally everything I had built, everything. Like my family was all of a sudden gone because I was closer to his family than to mine, and mine didn't live. They were 2 hours away, and his was all there. And oh, it was awful. And I had 2 stepkids as well that I helped raise. So it was the bottom. It was the bottom. Like so bad. All I had was $2,000, a desire, and my 2 kids. And I moved to New Orleans, which is where I'm originally from, which is I'm originally from Covington, which is about 30 minutes away, but I moved back to New Orleans, and I ended up getting a personal loan from a friend to help get an apartment. and then just figured out. And this friend just completely believed in me that I could start a business and actually make livable income. And by God, I did. I spent every single month being like, I don't know how I'm going to pay rent this month, but I'm going to make it happen. And mind you, I was in probably about 60 grand in debt, probably more with student loans and all that sort of stuff. It was bad. So, I was just not, it was either go live with my parents or, figure it out. So I just chose the figure it out mode because I knew I was smart enough and I had a good enough business acumen and to do those things. So, I started making money in May. I remember getting my first client in May of that year. So right after my birthday in April. And then it just started rolling. I just started posting about it. My podcast was starting to grow. And I ended up getting to the point where I could actually hire a coach. And it was like, oh my God, I really need to grow my business. And there's more I want to do because I got to the point where I had too many one-on-one clients. I had 15 at one point, and it was like, wow, this is a lot. So I was like, okay, well, how can I scale this? So I started a group program, and then my group program is going for a year now. So I went from literally nothing to making well over 6 figures in a year and a half, which is something I never, ever, ever thought I'd be able to do. But I swear the only reason it was possible was because of my connection to my sexuality and the energy that I had to do it. I don't know. I literally can't think of another human being that could have done what I possibly did. Sometimes I don't it's kind of like that superhuman strength that comes out in that mama bear mode, you know what I mean? And it's like, I have to do this. I don't have a freaking choice. And mind you, it was all survival mode, which sucked. It sucked. I was working a lot and I was really trying. And it wasn't until January of last year that I finally started, I had worked with a somatic coach and to release my own trauma from the divorce, basically, and also how that got me in that situation in the first place. And once I released that, then I started working with a different coach to help me just to receive. That was my goal. I was like, I'm not here to fix any issues. I just want to learn how to receive more. And I did that for 4 or 5 months or so. And then my hair had stopped growing over that year and a half of just being in complete survival mode. And it was so just brittle and gross. Clearly my hormones were being affected, right? And after working with her on my receiving and just being able to take in goodness because I finally was making it, I was like, oh my God, I'm actually okay. Wow, I'm actually okay. I'm more than okay. I'm thriving now. And then my hair started growing. I started noticing my little pieces of hair when I go run. And that was January last year. And so a little over a year ago. And then I started my group program on Valentine's Day of last year, and it's just been like a snowball ever since. So that's been a little bit of my journey, which definitely had a lot to do with the work I did on myself and access to energy through my sexuality.
Yeah, so it sounds like, I don't know if are you in partnership now or?
Yeah. And January last year also, I had claimed 2020 as my year for a sacred partnership, that I wanted to find a partner that, I could truly have a healthy relationship with, that wasn't trauma bonding, that I wasn't attracting because of old wounds and patterns, and because I had done that work and I was fucking bad.
I've never done that. Yeah, for me.
So I met him in June and we've been together ever since.
Aw, that's awesome. And what's different from sort of past relationships to this relationship in terms of, that you talk about trauma bonding? That's not what you're doing. So what is it like now?
Oh my gosh, light years different. Well, it looks like full ownership and sovereignty of everything that happens, which kind of sucks in a way because it's really easy to be a victim and blame everybody for your problems. But trust me, it doesn't lead to anywhere you want to go. So
totally, absolutely. Yeah,
it looks like I did a podcast episode on soulmates, twin flames, sacred partners, and this one really describes the difference between the three very well, and how soulmates and twin flames, there's this sort of, well, I wouldn't even say sort of, there's this extremely magnetic, almost addictive quality, especially twin flames, right? Addictive quality. You can't stop thinking about them. You everything, every cell in your body is so in it, right? And I had that twice. And I knew that's not what I wanted anymore because I knew my path was different. It was conscious choosing. It was choosing the relationship, not feeling like I was a victim to my body's own chemistry because you're on some freaking addictive high, when you first meet someone. And that is what it is. That's why passion tends to fade in relationships after 6 months to a year and a half, is because it actually becomes work. You actually have to use it. Your body's chemistry and all that, it starts to fade a little over time. And maybe obviously not completely, but right, that initial brain chemistry that's happening, it is literally, love is like a drug. It really is. Your brain makes a difference. So, that's a lot what twin flame relationships and sometimes soulmate relationships can feel like. And I had those things. So I was freaking done with that shit. I was like, dude, I want somebody that I can spend a lifetime with, that will meet me where I'm at, that we can both step into our king and queenhood around our relationship and take complete responsibility for ourselves and our lives. Even if it doesn't feel like that addictive quality to it, it's worth it because it's a conscious choosing, and that path of growth and evolution is so much more rewarding in the long run.
And it's sustainable in the long run, also in that experience of twin flame, I remember walking through town and being like, why am I walking to his house? Whose idea was that? Who's in control of my body right now? Because it's clearly not me. And those relationships ended in disaster and heartbreak and hurt and trauma, on both sides. And it's interesting. It's really good and sort of validating to hear you say that, actually, of this idea of consciously choosing, because sometimes those twin flame or those soulmate relationships, sometimes if you actively consciously choose to do the work together, they can transform into healthy relationships. But choosing to do the work isn't as exciting as saying F you, I'm gonna blame you for all my issues, let me go find another person who feels like you. Whereas consciously choosing, the Buddhists say that when you meet your soulmate, it doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like sitting next to a lake that's beautifully rippling. And you're just what a beautiful experience. I don't need that crazy passion love. I want deep, sustaining, beautiful, calm and nurturing love that has some really juicy, beautiful things in it too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's right on. And you're right. There are some relationships that can withstand that sort of crazy chemistry and passion, but very few, because it's very, very rare that both parties will ever do the actual work that's necessary in order for that type of relationship to harmonize, to balance you out in a sacred partnership. So, yep.
Yeah, it's much easier to meet that partnership when you are coming from a place of wholeness rather than, please complete me. I'm so lonely. Please complete me. It's like,
that's the only reason you're addicted to them, is because you see something in them that you think that you don't have. So once you actually have it, then the addiction starts to fade, and it's like, oh, right, it's just me seeing something of myself in them. recognizing that actually I already had that in me. Cool.
Yeah, how incredible. Oh, beautiful. And I'm curious, you mentioned at the very, very beginning that you had homebirth twice, like way back before it was trendy.
Is it trendy now?
Well, it's in the podcast I listen to and follow. Yeah, it is kind of getting trendy, but it's not really trendy in the grand scheme of like women in the world. I wish it was trendy. But you mentioned your kids were sort of way back there before 2018. So would you be open to talking about those birthing experiences and what you learned through them?
Yeah, the first one was life altering. It was 2007 when I got pregnant, and I was actually studying to be an OBGYN.
Okay. Wow.
I was in my senior year of college, undergrad, and I was doing rotations in a hospital in Tucson, Arizona. And I had seen lots and lots of C-sections because I followed an anesthesiologist for a year. And I just remember being like, oh my God, these poor women, like I'd seen so many, I wasn't so much there for the entire labor, right? I was just there for the C-section. So I had no idea what went on in the labors, but I had seen what the actual C-section was like. And I saw how the women were in their constitutions, like after they, their names went back together and after they got their baby. And I just remember thinking like, my God, if I ever get pregnant, that is the last thing I want. It was just so sad. I just, something in my body just was like, fuck no, like this is not okay. And I knew the statistics, like at the hospital I was at, I think 40% of women were having C-sections, but the World Health Organization has said many, many times that only 4% of women actually need one. So I knew that there was like this huge discrepancy, right? And fair warning, my dad, he was actually a plumber, air conditioning, and heating guy, but he had always wanted to be a chiropractor. So I kind of got the woo-woo side from him.
Okay.
Kind of always, anytime pharmaceutical commercials or anything, around surgeries would come up in the family or someone's having surgery, you could tell he was always just like, that's unnecessary. This is dumb. Why are we doing this kind of thing? So I think I kind of picked up on that growing up, and I always liked the medical system. So I was never trustworthy of it. So holistic health, like the dude would take like 30 freaking supplements and pills every day. Like I couldn't even keep up with him. It was so many. So I kind of grew up with that. And, I got pregnant soon after and just was like, fuck no, I'm not having a baby like this. So I took the Bradley method classes. Is that still a thing now? I don't know.
It is still a thing. Yeah.
Well, they've been around a while and I think they did a great job. So I took their classes with my husband at the time. And after the second one, I was like, I am not having a baby in the hospital. Like there's no way this is happening. And I hadn't even been to a doctor yet. I ended up going like a week later because I had like the first appointment scheduled. I went, I was 15 weeks. I let him check to see what the sex of the baby was. He's a boy I wanted to know. And I didn't go back until I was 37 weeks.
Great. I think women need to hear that. It's like, you don't have to go back if you don't want to.
No, you fucking don't have to go back. I didn't, because everything that I knew about birth, everything I had read, I had gotten emergency childbirth books. I had looked at everything, and like I was living in Idaho shortly after I got pregnant, right? And there was only one midwife, and she was awesome and great, but I was in college. I could not afford that, and she did not pay for it, and I really didn't want it. Like I met her, and I'm like, I don't want you at my birth. Like I met up with her just to see how much it cost and everything. I was like, I'm not feeling this, and I had this inner knowing of like, I don't want anyone at my birth. Like I just want to do this by myself. I want everybody to leave me the hell alone because I know how to do this. I don't need anybody to tell me how to do this. And there's everyone's like, well, how do you know that nothing would go wrong? That thought never even crossed my mind, right? It wasn't a thought of like something could go wrong. I don't know where that faith came from, but I think that it was just a part of my journey because my birth experience had to happen exactly as it did for me to be who I am today, right? So for some reason, I was not afraid at all, like no fear whatsoever. Anybody could come at me and was like, oh, that's not going to be me, like, and it wasn't like an arrogance. It was seriously like a pure innocence and a pure knowing of like, I know exactly how this is going to go.
I'm curious, do you know whether were you a home birth, like when at your birth, or were you a hospital birth? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I was a hospital birth, and so I'll share this about the story is that I ended up, my water broke on his due date at midnight, and I had him at 4:34 in the morning, but I didn't know that I was in labor until 2:30 in the morning. So I had a 2-hour labor, and I mean, I think I was in pre-labor before, but it just felt like gas and nausea. So yeah, it was really funny. And with where we lived in rural part of Idaho, like there's no way by the time I thought it was serious enough to have gone to anybody anyway, there's no way I would have made it in time anyway. So so back to your question, my grandma had 3 kids, my mom had 2, and they all had 4-ish hour births or shorter. Okay. So we had a family history of short precipitous labors and births. And I'm so glad I just trusted my body, trusted myself, because my second baby was born in 30 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a very amazing experience. I mean, obviously it's like a train wreck. I mean, it's awesome that it's short, but it is like everything hits you at once. So it was I mean, I've been to over 170 births, so I've seen all sorts of different things happen in births. But yeah, this was like a train wreck. And it was like, boom, we're in labor, boom, this baby's coming out. And it was like, lots of sounding, of movement, and the whole experience, it just made me be like, wow, like everything I got taught.
I got you lots of sound, lots of movement.
Yeah. So there's lots of sound, lots of movement, and even a little bit of out of body experience just to kind of make it through the whole thing. And I just remember being so glad that I had chose it that way, and then I had trusted the voice that I knew in my gut that was right. Like, you know how to do this. You don't need anybody, because I didn't want anybody to touch me the whole time. I wanted everybody to leave alone. I was like that animal, that cat that goes underneath the house and births its kittens, whatever. And then, my second one was born at hospital, actually, because he was 34 and a half weeks.
That's early,
yeah. He was too early. And I went in 24 hours after my water broke, because I knew that going in any sooner would have been helpful at all. And also knew science that, I didn't really need to think about doing anything until about 72 hours. So I had to advocate for myself like so hard in the hospital. It was a really amazing experience because they wanted to give me all sorts of stuff, and just like having a connection to your voice and your truth. Yeah, they wanted to give me all sorts of stuff, oxytocin or pitocin, whatever. And I just had a deeper connection with my truth that no, I don't need that. And I asked them to bring in a breast pump to get my labor started because my water was completely gone. So I needed to birth them soon. And I got a breast pump and tried it on and off to initiate labor. And every time I use it, I kind of feel something's going on, and like maybe I'll start to go into labor. And then after doing it for about 6 hours, I was like, all right, screw it, I'm just gonna take a nap. So I took a nap, and then I woke up and I started being like, yeah, okay, I'm starting to feel some things. And I was like, okay, you might want to call the doula, because I had a doula and a midwife at that point. And I was like, okay, call her because I think this is gonna be happening soon. Well, she got there, and I had like, I think she was there like 25 minutes until I had him. So I just remember having about 6 contractions that were like real full-on contractions before he came out. And I also was on the floor on all fours of the hospital room, which the doctor was like, I'm not catching a baby this way. I was like, well, then I guess you'll have to find someone else. And they found a midwife.
Yes.
Yeah, they found a midwife that they don't let midwives catch premature babies, but they let her with the doctor supervising. So she caught the baby. And he was fine when he came out. He was breathing fine, but he wasn't able to eat like from the breast. So we had to do the gavage tube and the NICU for 10 days, which was, oh god, quite an experience. But yeah, I think in all that I could sum up my birth experiences were is the power of your voice and being able to advocate for yourself, and don't expect other people to do it for you, because only you can do that, and that requires a connection to your truth and your inner knowing. And if you don't have that, it's gonna be really hard. It's gonna really be hard to advocate for yourself. So even though I wanted a doula there, I didn't expect her to advocate for me. Like, I knew I could do that, right? I knew that what I needed to say when I wanted to say it. So that's what made it a great experience. Even though I was kind of had to fight off doctors there for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the beauty of birth and like empowered birth is that like that advocacy, that like you can't tell me what's going on. When I hear stories about women who have done hospital births, they go, yeah, there were some challenges, but the thing that made it really wonderful was like staying connected to my power and not letting anybody mess with that. And I absolutely hear that. I'm curious about so you had a home birth, unmedicated, unassisted, and then you had a hospital birth, unmedicated, observed, sort of something, and then NICU afterwards. What would you say are the differences between your experience of bonding with your child, sort of that immediate, like that 10 minutes, hour, like 24 hours postpartum, between those 2 experiences?
Oh God. Well, when you have a preemie, it's not good. Like the first 24 hours with my free birth kid, I had him at 4:34. I remember we went to bed at 8 o'clock in the morning and took a nap. Like, it was so great. We just snuggled up in bed and just all took a nap together. And then that was that. And my parents and my grandparents were there, or they had come into town. And they had been there for like a week already, just kind of waiting for me to have the baby. And they came and visited. My grandpa was the first one to hold him besides me and his dad. So that was really special. But yeah, it was a surreal, absolutely surreal baby moon like experience. And then with the other one, I got a couple minutes with him right off the bat, but they had to put him on an IV and check his breathing. It was all the medical stuff. But we definitely said no to most of the things that they requested. And I never left the NICU the entire time I was there. So if you have a preemie, you do not have to leave your baby there. I was a fuck no to leaving my baby there. They tried to make me go home. And I'm like, no, I'm not going home. This is my kid, and I'm not going home without my kid. So I basically led. I was like, no, this is what we're doing. Like, we're going to do kangaroo care. You're not putting him in an incubator. He doesn't need that, because preemies are more likely to get jaundice, which he did have pretty bad. So we worked with skin-to-skin contact, and they were all just kind of like floored. Like, who is this woman? What is she doing? Like, I think doctors were just like she's wanting to do our job for us. And I'm like, it's not me wanting to do your job. It's me wanting to be a freaking mom. Like, come on. Like, yeah, I want to take care of my kid. And if there's something I can do to help him, then please show me how to do it. If I don't already know how to do it. So then putting in IVs in the gavage tubes that he had to have before he got the suck swallow reflex. Like, I mean, it was intense, because there was 2 moments where he got like the breathing and his oxygen got so low and he started to get like scary. And there was one at a time that we're like, oh my God, like, is my baby dying right now, kind of thing. So that was super intense. But that's one of the reasons I didn't want to leave, because I wanted to be there for that. I was there for that. I made him. I was going to be there for that.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, this, just the persistence, and having those sort of like elbows out, be like, I'm not going anywhere. You can't send me home. That's a level of, again, advocacy that a lot of women struggle with, and and I can't imagine maybe anything more terrible. I'm sure there's other things, but like just like to have gone home and be like, oh, sorry, your baby died while you were gone. Like, oh gosh, like to deal with the guilt and the shame and the whatever. Like, of course you want to be there. Like, no matter what happens, like whatever you can do and to support that. And good for you for advocating for like kangaroo care, that skin to skin. There's lots of good research that says that skin to skin is better than incubators in some ways. And yeah. What do you wish you had known about that NICU experience?
Oh God, I don't think anybody could have prepared you for that. Like, let's, and the sad thing is it is so common. The sad thing is it's so common, but there's nothing you can really do to prepare for it, because it just sucks. It just sucks so hard. When your babies come out and they're sick, I mean, there's just nothing worse. There's nothing worse. I think every parent's nightmare is losing their own child, right? It's their worst fear. And, when you have to face that right off the bat, when it should be just like this happy, amazing moment, right? And I didn't even have it bad. Like, what about these 20-weekers? These 21-weekers are losing a baby or stillbirth, right? Like, it's just terrible. And there's just no way to really prepare for it other than just know what you believe in, trust your gut, because you're the mom and you're the only one that really knows. Like, there is not a single doctor on the planet that knows your body or can know your body better than you. And they do a damn good job trying to convince you otherwise, but they don't, never will. So always trust your gut.
That's beautiful advice. Yeah. What did you do sort of after that experience, like when you came home, to help yourself integrate from that or like heal? I can imagine that the helplessness that came along with that might have been traumatic. What did you do to support yourself in that healing process?
Yeah. I mean, I had quick recovery from birth, so that was good, so I was fine. And I think it was just the constant watching him. I mean, we weren't going to be able to go home from the NICU until he could eat with either a bottle. Like, obviously I didn't give him, like, I breastfed him just breast milk, but we had to like put it through a tube into his belly for several days. And then when we took that out, then we could try and, have him attached to my breast. And it took about a month before he could fully breastfeed on his own. We would have to switch between using breast milk in a bottle, and then like I would always start him on me so that he associated getting fed with me more than the bottle. And I was finally able to ditch the bottle with him after 1 month. So after he's a month old, we went exclusively to breastfeeding. So that was really cool. But yeah, I mean, it was intense. I had mother-in-law come and help. My mom came and helped like when she left. Yeah, I mean, even though we had that help, they weren't staying and helping through the middle of the night. So the middle of the night stuff, I mean, I co-slept, so it was a lot easier on me, and I could read his cues. And like I was so terrified of the whole lack of oxygen thing and the breathing thing from that one time. I was like, oh my god, I could die. I just wanted to keep a constant eye on him. So I had we co-slept with her first as well, but he, the baby was in the middle of the bed, and I just always had an eye on him. He was in this little sleeper thing, so I could just reach over and feel him, check on him all throughout the night. But I was also 25 or 26, so I had a lot more energy then. I can't imagine people having babies with issues and problems at my age now. I don't know how y'all do it. Because it was so different even between being 23 and 26 having a baby. Like I noticed. So I often wonder how women that are in their 30s do it. Like I don't know how y'all do it.
Yeah, I mean, I had my son at 24, and it's been 10, he's turning 10, and we're talking about starting another round coming up, and part of me's like, whose idea was this? I was like, well, my past self and my partner's, and it's like I'm still on board, but like you said, it's a different experience, and that 20-year-old energy versus that 30-year-old energy. I feel like personally, my energy sort of like tanked most between like 26 to 32, but that was like life stuff going on, and just like we talked about earlier, like disconnection from personal power, disconnection from sexual energy, trauma buildup, stuff like that. And I think that clearing a lot of that stuff out can really change it. At least that's what I'm telling myself. Nice. No, that's in jest. Like, absolutely, I feel way better than I did for that like 5-year super dark period where I was really disconnected. For that, I feel absolutely so much better and more like a more grounded 25-year-old, something like that. So, yeah. Oh gosh, wow, we covered a lot of ground, a lot of different topics today. Yeah. Is there anything that maybe you had a question about, or anything else you'd like to share with people who are listening today?
Just that working on your sexuality changes everything. So, if there's one area of your life that you want to work on, maybe your main goal is a career right now. Maybe it's building wealth creation, all that. But just know that sexuality work is the basis. It's the foundation. So when you work on it, it really does change everything. Because when you change the foundation, you change the structures. And the structures can be way more supportive if the foundation is sturdy. So work on your sexuality. Everybody has work to do around their sexuality. And don't be afraid to invest in yourself in this area. Invest a lot in this area. If there's anything you should invest in, hopefully it's you. And hopefully it is in the realm of sexuality because of what I just said. That it affects everything else.
Absolutely. If people want to get started, down this path with you specifically, where's the place for them to start? What kind of offerings? Or you mentioned a group program earlier and whatnot. So what's the best place for them to start?
Yeah. Well, my website is www.tillystorm.com, and there's all sorts of freebies on there. You can download my Ignite Your Desire e-guide. I have a how to start a JDEG practice PDF with actual JDEG practices for you to try. I have a store so you can buy your JDEG from me there as well. And if you're interested in tantric sex, I have a tantric sex starter kit with 4 audio guided practices to try with your partner to see if it's something that you really like and really want to learn more of. So you can find all of those on the website there. And of course, subscribe to my podcast, The Multi-Orgasmic Mama.
Okay, somehow I managed to miss that. Multi-Orgasmic Mama is your podcast. Gosh. Well, since I have you on the phone here, are you interested in interviewing me at some point in the future? I would love to talk about being multi-orgasmic again with you.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Do interviews, or is it more like you sharing?
Yeah, I do some interviews, but I've been doing this for 3 years, and I've found that most people enjoy when the podcasts are under 20 minutes. They also like it most when it's just me, but a lot of them do like the interviews too. It's just I sprinkle them in every now and then, so I don't do too many of them because they're so long.
Yeah, well, I'll let you take the lead on that one if you want to, as per your desire, and I'll make sure that a link to your podcast ends up in the show notes and whatnot.
Cool, awesome, thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate you spending the time connecting and talking.
Yeah, me too. Awesome. Well, we'll talk soon.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Thank you so much for being a part of this podcast and listening to this experience with Tilly and I. You absolutely can reach out to her if you are interested in learning more about your intimacy. The journey never ends. Pleasure continues to blossom and gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So I welcome that, and I welcome you to explore that with her on this beautiful journey. Thank you so much for being a part of the membership. Thank you so much for being a part of the tribe. And I wish you the most beautiful day.
Thank you so much for listening to today's interview with me. There is so much more waiting for you. If you would like to access the bonus exclusive membership content, which includes the finale of this interview and some really exciting exercises, then please head over to bulletproofmoms.com/member, which will allow you to access not only the end of this interview, but also the video format, which has some really interesting visuals that don't make it through the processing in the audio, as well as the end of this interview, as well as bonus meditations, brain training tracks, and access to our online school, which includes courses like Relationship Reset, Circles of Commitment, How to Save Your Relationship and How to Save Your Marriage, marriage, how to make intelligent decisions as a single mom when you begin dating again, and many other courses, including the Joygasmic birth course, your complete guide to creating a joyful, ecstatic, pain-free, and pleasurable birth. And you will also get to see the really silly dance that my son is doing in the background of me talking in this video. So I absolutely encourage you to join the membership. It is pay what you want, and there is a wide range of payment options available. So if you are on a limited income, absolutely do not think that cash is a barrier to your ability. I'm sorry, I'm barely being able to keep it together because my son is just doing the silliest dance, and it's totally worth it to upgrade just to see how ridiculous he is. I absolutely love you guys, and I'm so grateful to be able to make this content available for free. And thank you so much to everyone who is already subscribed as a member and who allows me to continue doing this wonderful work and being of service to you all in this way. Thank you so much for your support. And the credit song from the beginning of the podcast is from a beautiful friend of mine who I met in La Cruz de Guanajuato. Well, La Cruz de La Cruz de. How does it go again?
Mom, it's La Cruz de Guanajuato.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that one. Oh my gosh, I used to think of it as La Cruz de Guanacaxtle, but that's not how you pronounce it. It's really a terrible pronunciation. La Cruz for short, which is near Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and he's an absolutely incredible musical artist. So please go check out Sonny, Sonny, and his work on Spotify. There's also links to that in the show notes. So again, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the membership. Alex, you want to say anything before we go? Oh yeah. It's important to be silly, and you can claim your silly back. We've got classes coming out on that too. Mwah. So if you're still here and you're still listening, obviously there is some more engagement that you would like to be a part of. Please head over and join the membership. The link is in the show notes. So much love to you.